Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Subnet Show. I am your host, Gabriel Cardona, and I'm stoked to be back this week with my amazing co-host, the man with the most cats in crypto, coming back from Korea. What is up, Connor Daly?
Annyeonghaseyo.
Nice. Round of applause. Welcome
Hey,
back, man. How
everybody,
was
I'm
your
back.
journey? Yeah, how was your journey?
It was incredible. I had an amazing time in South Korea. I feel like I say this every time I come back from an Ava Labs trip, but yeah, it was one of the best trips of my life. Had an amazing time getting to know the Korean community, getting to know and hanging out with some of our Ava Labs team members, getting to watch some Formula E. I can talk about it a little bit more long-winded, but it was a great time, and I'll give you guys the recap soon.
Awesome. Okay, well, welcome back. Well, as usual, if you are a longtime watcher or listener of the Subnet Show, you know that we have been very, very fortunate to, because of our position, both myself and Connor being at all the labs, we have just been so plugged in with so many different people, just having an absolutely huge impact with their life and their work. And today we are incredibly fortunate to have yet another block star, somebody who I personally think is one of the best thinkers, one of the most clear thinkers in the Avalanche ecosystem right now. So it's truly an honor to have him on the show. Please welcome Lucian Stroie, who is the Senior Technical Product Manager at Ava Labs. Welcome, Lucian.
Too kind, Gabriel, too kind. And we work together, so it's like
But it's true. It's true. I appreciate clarity of thought. It's one of the things that struck me about Goon, actually, when I finally joined the team and I was sitting in these daily calls with him. I realized, wow, man, his clarity of thought is like a laser. He will just cut right through everything, right to the point. I guess that's what happens when you're a professor at Cornell for 20 years. So yeah, I appreciate clarity of thought. But thanks for joining us, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a really exciting time,
Yes.
and yeah, man, it's been a really wild ride. I think I'm closing my 6 month anniversary at Ava Labs, and I've greatly enjoyed it. It moves really fast.
God, it's only been 6 months.
Yeah, yeah.
You went full time right around Summit, didn't you?
Yes, exactly.
Oh man, I was like, but wait, Summit was like 6 months ago. I forgot that you were because you and I had known each other from before then. You did some consulting, but yeah, you've been full time for 6 months. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Got
I
it.
mean, it's hard to know when it counts, but
Got it. So we want to dive into Lucian's crypto journey and crypto vision. But prior to doing that, I figure we should probably give Connor to give us some type of recap, a little bit more in depth about what exactly went down in Korea. You got anything?
yeah, I want to hear about Korea too. It
Yeah,
was so cool.
it was an adventure. I had a wonderful time. Yeah, this was my first time visiting South Korea, second time visiting Asia. I'd been to Japan once before. So I was super excited for this trip. I was checking the weather radar or the weather forecast the week before my trip, and wouldn't you know it, from the moment I land to the moment I depart, rain the entire time, thunderstorms the entire time.
Oh,
So
really?
I was packing all my rain gear, and then when I show up, the day I'm leaving, I have a cousin that lives out there. A couple of people were messaging me, worst rain in 80 years. People were dying, stuff was flooding. I land, I make it home from the airport. It wasn't raining too bad. Got to the hotel, tried to go out to dinner that first night. The hotel said they couldn't call me a cab. I had to go to the street to flag one down. So I had to cross like 1 or 2 blocks just to get to the main street. I had to turn back before I even got there. My like shoes were totally soaked through. It was raining so hard. And it was a little bit of a mess. And I was expecting my whole trip to be like that. Turns out that was basically the last it rained while I was there, which was incredibly fortunate for me. However, the next day, I was talking to some Ava Labs teammates, and we found out that the venue that we had originally booked for our conference had flooded. It was actually it was at something that was called like the floating island. It was a man-made island on the Han River, and the bridge to that island flooded, making the island itself inaccessible, which
Wow.
was kind of made things a little bit worse because we had already moved all of our stuff into the venue. So all of our merchandise, all of our shirts and stuff that we had to give away, all of our sponsor banners, all of our booths, all trapped.
Wow.
So with 24 hours of notice, we had to cancel the first day of the event and move the second day to a new venue, get all new sponsor stuff, get all new graphics packages, get all new video games to, racing sims to play, food. Like, it had to be totally redone from scratch in 24 hours.
Oh my God.
And
Jade
our
was
event
hustling.
team,
Did Jade do
Jay,
it?
Chelsea, our on the ground friend George, they did a fantastic job. I got a shout out, Avery too. He was helping out with socials. We have our graphics guy back at Ava Labs, whose name escaped me, but a lot of people we were getting support back from, the main hub in the US as well. And it was a really fantastic effort. And most people wish their plan A was as good as our plan B. Like, it was still a fantastic event. Even though it was backup, it was still amazing. We ended up hosting it in the VIP area of the Formula E race. So it was at the Olympic Stadium, actually, which was kind of very much like a concrete stadium, but they actually built out a room inside of the concrete stadium where they put up kind of like some like drywall, and they like put in a ceiling and stuff. So we had a couple rooms going. We had a spot for speakers. We had a couple food trucks. One of those food trucks had maybe one of my favorite bites in the whole city. Some really great bibimbap bowls, some like beef sushi kind of stuff, some drinks. And it still turned out really well. And it was really fun meeting the community there.
How many people? Speaking of community, how big was it?
I think it was like 500.
Not bad.
It was a little bit of a smaller venue compared to some of our previous ones. Very different vibe as well. Just kind of my personal observations that kind of South Korea has a bit more like language and cultural barriers compared to some of the other countries we've been to in Europe. Less English. There were definitely people there who only spoke Korean, which we had prepared for, and we actually had Korean live translations, and so you could actually go get a headset and listen to a live translator do the talks like at the United Nations.
By the way, those people are wizards. The people who are able to translate highly technical stuff in real time, it's amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool because we had some people who I gave a talk there. They listened to my talk. They were so excited, and they came up to talk to me in Korean, and I was just like, oh no.
What was your presentation?
So I did basically launching your first subnet, talking about the Avalanche CLI, what a subnet is, and how to use it to get started. But it was a great event. We met with a lot of local partners. We talked to a lot of the largest companies in Korea. I have to say, I got to give huge shout outs to Gyuho and Olivia. Gyuho is an engineer on our team, and Olivia is our Korean BD lead. I was so impressed by both of them. And like I said, this was a challenging place for us to be, so we couldn't necessarily support with everyone the way we would, because when you're talking to a group of Korean executives who only speak Korean, I'm not going to be so useful with them, and like a lot of our BD team also not as useful with them. So Yuho, he's an engineer, but he stepped into his BD role very well this week. He did a fantastic job and was able to provide really great technical explanations, even though, like he said, he's done all of his technical work in English. So he's still, even he is being a very native Korean, lived in Seoul most of his life. It was even challenging for him to talk about some of this stuff. So, major props to him. And Olivia, absolutely locking down the Korean market. I was really impressed with everything she did and all the partners she was able to bring to the table. So huge shout out to them. And then, the race itself was really fun. We got to hang out with Andretti. And the cool thing about having the event at the Formula E race is that we got to do a pit lane walk with the team and with everybody. So everyone that was at the event got to go. So we got to go see the cars in the garage, and then we got to see what's called the shakedown, which is basically where after the teams have like moved in and they've reassembled their cars, reassembled their workstations, they basically just check and make sure everything turns on. So they go out and just do like 2 laps on the track to make sure that They rebuilt everything correctly. So we got to see the cars go out live for a minute. We actually saw a crash, which it was really embarrassing.
What happened?
Oh, just a car like slipped and like hit the wall right during the shakedown. And the Avalanche Andretti drivers told us that that was really embarrassing because they should not have been pushing on those laps. It was not a was not a time to test their limits. And their mechanics then had to go rebuild the car instead of quitting for the day. So yeah, it was a fantastic event. I loved my time there. I'm already planning my trip back. I love South Korea. Love the community there. So, you know, I gotta say, Subnet show has not broken in enough. We need to have like Korean translations or things. You know, gotta reach into that audience a little bit more.
Was there any announcements that come to mind? I didn't follow the news too closely. Did we announce anything from a product?
I don't think so. It was mostly just, you know, making connections with the local market, and trying to, you know, different companies are kind of competing in different areas. And so we want to make sure that we have a presence in Asia, that we're tapped into the local market, and that all of the big companies that are down there know that they can talk to us and that we have relationships with them. Because not everybody's doing that. Not everyone can be everywhere all at once. Sure. So, you know, this was our first time visiting Asia. And, you know, we didn't just talk to people from Korea. There were also some people there from like Singapore. There were people there from Australia. So trying to just make as many connections as we can and make sure we're keeping relationship with what's an important market for us.
There's something interesting about South Korea. It has the highest per capita penetration of crypto.
Oh, interesting. So, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 1 in 4 people in South Korea has.
Is it friendly laws? Why in particular there?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I don't know why. I think it's because it's a very advanced society.
Definitely.
Similarly to the way you would think about Japan, but I think I don't know. Is it financial risk tolerance? I don't know.
I wonder also if it's just the accessibility, because I know Samsung Wallet, I think, supports a lot of crypto, and I think a lot of people pay with Samsung Wallet. So they didn't really have Apple Pay or Google Pay there. They might have had Apple Pay, but yeah, Samsung Pay was the like main thing that I saw. And
yeah,
I know Samsung
built
Pay
a hardware wallet into the wallet. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, could be it. But it also, I happened to look. There were a bunch of exchange hacks by North Korea. And when that happened, I was like, oh, South Korea, like there's so many exchanges. Why? And it was very, very prolific. It could also be because of the gaming culture as well. There's a pretty big esports culture. But
also very big mobile gaming culture.
Oh, yeah. That's cool.
Mobile games are huge. Like, and they're not just for kids, you know, a lot of like, you know, older people, adults, whatever. It's like, it's very common and not like weird to play them at all ages. And there's no stereotypes there.
Yeah. I was actually showing Gabriel, like the crazy degree of monetization in mobile games. And the interesting thing is that it's no longer like the microtransactions, in-game purchases, and the various patterns that have been designed for mobile. It's actually now the largest revenue generator for the entire gaming industry. So mobile actually represents over 50% of all revenue. It's bigger than PC and console combined. And it's wild. It's really crazy. And if you look at it in aggregate, video games are bigger than movies, sports, every other entertainment combined. It's
that's crazy. Yeah, that's wild.
And this is really your area of expertise, because kind of your role at Ava Labs right now is you're a senior technical product manager, basically in charge of subnets. So you're the guy who, whenever a company wants to talk to Ava Labs about launching a subnet, you're the one they talk to. So I know Yeah,
Once
you're
they get
also,
far enough along, I basically approach them and I say, hey, like, you guys are ready to go into production. All right, let's do it. Crack my knuckles and all right, what do we need to do? What's your use case? How do we do it? And then we solve all the problems incrementally until they're ready to launch in production. So it's an awesome place to be. Yeah.
yeah. I was gonna say, that's a really nice way to say you hear some requests of like, oh shit, we don't have this yet. Connor, we need to go build this real quick.
And then I like message, I'm like, I'm about to recommend that someone goes through this tutorial and we need to update it like before this afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's start
building the plane as it's taking off. Yeah.
Yeah, so out of all the product people I've worked with, I would think or product or business, sometimes it's hard for me to see exactly where the overlap lies, but out of all the non-engineers that I've worked with, you're the most engineer. So I think of you as an engineer. You definitely got the chops, I'm sure of it. And so let's kind of start about let's talk about your crypto journey a little bit. So I guess let's start at the beginning. How and when did you get into crypto?
Yeah, well, I studied math applied in finance in college. And then I realized I really didn't want to work in the insurance industry. And I spent 5 years in Romania, where I was born, and I kind of reconnected with my roots. And I worked in philanthropy, and I was working in grants management, and I was also managing like technology innovation programs and agricultural and rural development at the same time. So it just kind of happened, and I ended up launching a tech startup about like 4 years into my time in Romania, and I was a non-technical co-founder then, but it was basically building an app that could take all of the work that I did in philanthropy, which was building agricultural cooperatives in rural Romania, and I wanted to automate it because after about 3-4 years of working on the project, I've worked with about 120 households, and I was aiming to scale to the 8 million subsistence farmers in Romania. And I just had this really deep appreciation for tech in terms of like the impact, because there's nothing that really scales as well as a technology product that can directly improve someone's life, and how fast it can reach people, and just kind of like the instant marginal utility of each additional user really caught on. So,
you don't mind me asking, how old were you at this point?
I was 24 or 25.
So you got into tech relatively late compared to some people who got in whenever they were in high school or something writing code.
Yeah. I held back in learning programming and computer science. There was a bit of a stigma associated with it. And I viewed it more like manual labor rather than an art form. But I definitely regret not having started earlier. It's a new way of thinking.
Yeah, I feel you.
It's like a fundamental, it like helps organize all of your thoughts in everything that you do. So anyone who's non-technical, but you feel like you would like benefit from it, it's practice, it's repetition, but once it becomes fluent, then it becomes very creative very quickly too. So I absolutely love that. And that's essentially what happened. Like my startup didn't really take off. And I moved back to the United States and I enrolled into a coding bootcamp. And then my first job was at a management consulting company. And the very first project that I got put on was building a Ethereum proof of concept. And this was back in 2006 or 2007. So the tooling was garbage. And I only had about 2 weeks to build it. And yeah, like I made some very good friends, and basically a friend and I built out the prototype, first one in 2 weeks, and then like the proper one in about 3 months. But that was kind of like my trial by fire. into blockchain. And it was basically the first application I'd ever built by myself. So after that, I joined the cybersecurity research lab that focused only on blockchain. And I found some really good mentors and very good friends as well there. And we're still in touch and collaborated for quite a while. And then ended up moving with part of my team to Deloitte afterwards. And like the former head of development for that research lab took another job. And I ended up having to kind of build a large portion of the Deloitte blockchain application myself. And the team didn't really add engineers for like 2.5 years. And I stayed there for 3 years until like we got a product security audited and approaching production.
Do you want to name drop that Deloitte project? I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with it.
I do, yeah. It was the Close as You Go project, and the Deloitte project was using Avalanche, and it was designed to use a subnet. And what it does is it's a secure data sharing platform that helps responsible parties essentially pay for natural disasters. And what we essentially did at Deloitte, and this wasn't just me, I was just heavily focused on the development side. There's a great large team working on figuring out all the business processes to actually make this happen. But we essentially encoded the process of getting reimbursed from FEMA in the case of a natural disaster. And the process essentially sometimes takes about 2 years, but using our system, it can be taken down to about 2 weeks. So we combined local, state, and federal government agencies, and we encoded the business processes into smart contracts. And we created a secure distributed data sharing platform that's independently auditable. And and it's got a security audit. It's approaching production. It's in trials currently. And I'm super excited. And I'm excited to work with the team to get it pushed to a subnet.
Wow, this is epic, Lucian. So you were working with Avalanche before you joined Avalanche. I didn't make that connection until just now.
Yeah, I actually had a friend who was an early engineer at Avalanche, and I actually got access to the closed alpha very early on. So it was originally built with Quorum, and I happened to hit a very inconvenient bug while demoing the application at Consensus. And it was a consensus failure, actually. So ironic. I had to, while presenting my application at the floor of Consensus, a little hungover, I had to live debug it while presenting to people. And so Avalanche doesn't have that problem. And in fact, it's been actually such a no-brain change. And the further I drilled in, the more it made sense. So I've been a very early adopter of Avalanche and a very deep believer as well. So yeah, when I got the chance to join, I definitely wanted to take it.
And one thing that you said that just made me laugh a little bit, this might have stuck out to some listeners too. You said the original process took 2 years for Deloitte or for the government to carry out. And just, man, if you haven't worked in government before, you don't know how long things take. But that's the scale at which we're talking about. I have seen things take way longer. So I used to work in cybersecurity and defense, and the Navy. Actually, the process for them to put a new technology on a ship takes 14 years.
Wow.
I was working on a project for a little while. We were just trying to speed that up, trying to say, like, if we get people to use Agile, maybe we can get it down from 14 years to 2 years. That was the goal.
Wow.
So yeah,
Yeah,
that's what it's like working in government sometimes. And then you come to crypto and it's just like, can you ship this major life's work thing in like 2 weeks? And then you're just like, yeah, sure.
So then it sounds like Lucian, your experience was with EVM. Did you have any UTXO Bitcoin model experience?
No, I didn't.
So,
But I did like to experiment, and technically, I mean, I was really deep into Ethereum. Like, I was actively reading like all of the research blogs. So technically, like, Plasma Cash in its first implementation was a UTXO based scaling solution on top of Ethereum, which was the original Matic token.
okay.
But like, I didn't actually need the cryptocurrency in a lot of my applications. It's interesting working in the government space because a precondition is that the government can't hold appreciating assets. Like, period. They can't own stocks. The federal government cannot own stocks, right? So the same thing happened with cryptocurrency. And a lot of the applications that I really wanted to push to a public blockchain, you couldn't, because there was always some kind of token involved. And then when subnets rolled out and you can have a valueless native token, it was like, oh, perfect, finally. Like, I can stop answering questions on whether or not we're going to build it with Hyperledger in a private network. Like, no, it's never going to happen. And yeah, so there was a lot of experimentation. But I think the real value proposition for government wasn't the token. Tokenization of assets, yes, but the real value was the fact that they need to pay for security. And decentralization is a new paradigm for securing systems. So rather than digging moats around singular secure databases, which have a record of, regardless of how deep you dig the moat, can still be breached, you distribute a part of the security layer, and you have a diversity of people who have common interests in seeing the system actually works properly. And all of a sudden you have tamper evident, and it's more widely distributed, and it's more secure because you can find a 0 day in one machine, but finding 0 day in 1,400 plus mainnet validator nodes on Avalanche is a risk I'm willing to take with my life savings. Right. So it's a different security property. And there's a lot of use cases like this that have real practical applications that people haven't really scratched the surface of, and super passionate to like dig through all of them.
So whenever you came on board, it seems like you have been doing, I don't know if it's just research you've been doing on the side, or I'm not exactly sure, but it seems like you've been focused a lot on gaming. I know you and myself have had several conversations on gaming. Have you just been drawn to that, or do you see something particularly transformative about GameFi? Just sort of what are your thoughts on that area?
Yeah, so gaming and Avalanche have had I kind of had a feeling that there was going to be a GameFi explosion on Avalanche when I started, because I did a simple back the napkin calculation, and I thought, well, all of these people are using Binance, they're using Polygon, they're sacrificing decentralization for cheaper cost per transactions, right? And subnets undercuts all of them because there's nothing cheaper than having your own native token. That's the power of scaling at the network level, right? So as long as we can make it easy for them to deploy an EVM compatible network, then we're literally cheaper than the cheap EVMs, right? Without sacrificing the decentralization. And I'd already seen several projects kind of like experimenting early on in GameFi, and I was looking at how many transactions on these other chains were actually taken up by games, and it was absolutely massive. And there were tons of very low value transactions, but there were tons. And I realized that like we have the perfect competitive advantage for this, right? Because they don't get shut out of liquidity, like building a private blockchain or something. You still have access to the Avalanche C chain. You still have a community. You have an ecosystem that's like rich and growing. And you have scalability in the back end. So I realized that the first people to flee to the absolute lowest transaction costs will be games, because the alternative is you charge your customers for all those costs. And it's hard to build a game that's fun if you nickel and dime users on every single in-game action that they make. So I've had the opportunity after a lot of gaming subnets have approached us to work with teams and kind of design out how they will use subnets. And yeah, there's absolute bangers coming to our network. And yeah, now it's just a question of like them actually delivering the games.
And what are you able to speak about recently? There was a big game that went live on Avalanche. I believe you helped bring to fruition. I don't know if you're able to talk about that at all, or the journey of that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't take credit for their work, but I can definitely say that I helped them along the way to be able to answer.
Who are we talking about?
Specific questions, but most likely we're talking about Castle Crush, because they have a NFT that's launched on the C chain, and you can buy it now. And then once you buy it, you connect your wallet with your in-game account. And the way that they built that was actually quite ingenious. So you have like social login in-app, and you have a blockchain account. So in the game, you can't actually purchase anything with cryptocurrency. It's still in the iOS App Store, and that's kind of dangerous. But you can go on a permissionless blockchain network and buy the NFT. And then on their website, you can connect the two accounts, and your NFT appears in game, and you can play your NFT in Castle Crush. I've been doing it today, and it's like boxing with weighted gloves. So yeah, my rank has increased substantially.
Yeah, so it's people laughed at the Solana phone, but I totally see it, because these Apple and Google Play stores are just so predatory towards crypto that if you actually want to be able to own your software, you kind of need your own marketplace. You kind of need to remove the people who are going to charge you 30% fees and just ban you if you try to circumvent you. So
yeah, but I would actually say one better, right? What if you can go around the App Store?
Yeah, I mean that would be ideal, because not hardware is hard.
Exactly.
Producing a working phone, not even a great phone, a working phone, is probably tremendously expensive.
I can't imagine what it would be like to maintain a mobile phone operating system when you don't have control over the supply chain of the hardware. So like, I don't think anyone besides Google and Apple currently have a functioning mobile phone operating system. Even Microsoft really, really struggled.
Yeah, no, their phone efforts died over and over and over again. Yeah. Nobody wants to do that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. It's just the real win is that everybody also still wants an iPhone. So you got to make something that's 10x better than an iPhone or a high-end Android to get people to switch. And that's just like, it's a big ask.
Yeah, it's probably not going to happen. There's too much money being invested for a startup to be able to just pull it off easily. But the way that crypto has been interacting with it has been super interesting, because you have certain types of users that are large and prominent in the mobile game space, and they're called whales in games. Like, the people who spend a ton of money are called whales. kind of like crypto, where large crypto holders are also called whales. And these users make up a vast majority of your revenue. So if you're able to convince them to essentially use an alternative payment system, you instantly make 30% more in your leading revenue generating users. And that's just the start. So the regulatory arbitrage will instantly start making these games more money just by going around the app store and making their high-end users purchase using crypto. And NFT purchases is the perfect use case for this. But it gets even better because once you actually introduce users to Web3, you can actually introduce completely different monetization strategies. And this is what really excites me about crypto and Web3. And I think there's a bit of backlash from the gaming industry in general, being like, we don't want to be associated with Web3. It's actually going to be a lot better than current mobile monetization strategies because it allows you to actually own your in-game assets. And it allows for different relationships between you, the user, and app developers. And app developers are all on board. It could be very pro-consumer. And we'll see, especially like Castle Crush, for example. The reason that they're building a subnet, they have 1.4 million monthly active users. And users have been playing for 5-6 years already. And they're about to airdrop all of the in-game assets that people have acquired over that entire time as NFTs into their wallet, right? So you don't even have to, and it's still going to be free to play, right? So you can still earn NFTs in game, but like to get the really good ones, there's still a grind. However, you can actually go on a marketplace and buy one from another player. And it's going to radically transform kind of how their market works and how it's going to re-energize their game and the player community. And honestly, it might even like help with esports, create different types of activities. It's going to change the entire mechanism of not just monetization, but the way that the community interacts with the game. And I get to sit through a lot of these. So this is just one example. And they're like almost all of the games that are launching on Avalanche that I'm working with daily has something really like unique and empowering within their strategy for monetization. And it's awesome. It's all just because finally, after NFTs, people say, oh, I get it. It's a digital Pokemon card. Digital ownership has mass market appeal. People finally get it, right? The way I say it is you don't have to convince anyone of Austrian economics in order for them to understand that it's a Beanie Baby or a Pokemon card, right? But you can trade it online. And that meme has been incredibly powerful. So
especially even less, sorry to cut you off, you have to explain it even less so to digitally native people, right? So as you skew towards a younger market, like my son, a 13-year-old just gamer, like ultra gamer guy, he gets it intuitively, right? So it even skews better towards the target market, which is young kids.
Yeah, and it's actually been amazing because I've watched kind of the rate at which technology adoption happens with different user groups. And I think the entire crypto industry knows that there's a complete overlap between gaming and people who get crypto. I just think that we have, as an industry, have a little bit of repair work to do with regards to the current state of the art and what our ambitions and our ideals are and how it will be used. The first projects to launch weren't very technologically sophisticated. But as a result, like people assume that Web3 games can't be fun. That's not a prerequisite. It's just that the games that weren't fun were the first to be built because they were a little lower effort.
And it's kind of like what you mentioned. I experienced the same thing when I kind of quiz my son and his friends about what their thoughts are on Web3 and tokenomics. Obviously, these are 13-year-old kids, but they're aware that cryptocurrencies are entering their games. And as you mentioned, there's some pushback because people see pay to play, or they see something like microtransactions, or they see like Diablo Immortal, which is this great video he shared with me, which I'll paste in the description below. But there's 17 virtual currencies in there, and there's just layer upon layer upon layer of all this, specifically to get you just to spend money where they actually sacrifice some of the gameplay in order to make money. And then you see $100,000 JPEGs of a rock, and people were kind of confused on what exactly, like, what are you guys introducing? But you were saying it the other day, you said it so well, I wish I could quote exactly what you said. You said something like, it gives you status and it gives you utility, because all of a sudden you own these assets and you're able to move them in between games. I don't know if you can speak to that at all.
Yeah, and there is a slight difference between buying an in-game asset and not having proper ownership of it, versus buying something and actually having possession of it and having it non-custodially and being able to potentially even use it in other video games or cash it out and essentially try to recover some of the funds if you decide to quit the game. There is some power, and there's also like the negative consequences. And I think this is going to be an important one for us to notice. When Web3 games enter the field, and this is already too late, honestly, people are going to push it as investments. And like we saw this with digital real estate. And when those markets crash, they crash really hard. And they were very immature. Like there was no games, but they were selling real estate. There are other places where there are games, and when there is a game, there is a community and there is value. So it's actually completely different. But there was certain cases in which people basically promoted and pushed products before they were ready. But yeah, it was probably easier to do with crypto, but not necessarily like, yeah, there's plenty of really legitimate ways to do it, and even virtual real estate is probably going to be done well, especially for metaverse type games. And like I actually do know of a project working with us that's doing virtual real estate, and it's a proper metaverse game on mobile. The game's called High Rise, and they have 20 to 30 million monthly active users. It's wild, right? And it's mostly a female audience. Majority, I think 70% or 80%. And that's pretty rare for a video game, but like you look at the aesthetic and you realize like, okay, this is truly like kind of a community building. So it's awesome when real games can actually get benefits from like the technology that we're building. And I'm really glad that kind of like proper video games that are built are going to start using it, right? It's and I hope and we're probably going to be able to kind of repair over time the reputation of Web3 in gaming. But yeah, we definitely need more good projects like that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest obstacle right now is I think all crypto people are gamers pretty much, or at least gaming positive. But I would not say the reverse is true. Yeah, there's definitely a large population of the traditional gaming community that is very anti-crypto.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of their arguments are correct. I think a lot of them complain about the environmental impact. A lot of them really dislike the excessive monetization in games.
Exactly.
I think a lot of the stuff that they complain about is not a problem with crypto. It's actually a problem with the gaming industry already. Like you guys brought up, Diablo Immortal, maybe there's 16 virtual currencies in it or whatever. None of them are cryptocurrencies, and it's an entirely Web2 game. These business models are just already here. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that moving to an NFT style system is actually more empowering and returns more ownership to the player, so that if you're going to operate in this kind of predatory environment, the player has some recourse and has some control, and isn't just subject to the whims of the game creator, and actually has some independent ownership. But overall, reclaiming the narrative is a really tall task, but I think the best thing we can possibly do is make good examples, make games that are not exploitive, make archetypes that show that these can be a good thing, so that we don't just have to hold up the Ponzi schemes and totally crashflationed examples is, well, this is the only possibility there is. Once people see something that they can say, oh, I get this, this makes sense, I think we're going to have it's going to be a lot easier to change the narrative.
Yeah, I think that there's some, real quick, I think there's something that is just going to be huge, and it's kind of what I'm just calling like this mashup culture of games, and that is the ability to take in-game items and use them in other games. I think it's a can of worms, and I think it's going to be challenging to do right, because number one, you're going to need interoperability standards. How do I take a sword from Legend of Zelda and use it in Fortnite, right? Like, that's a pretty crazy idea, but why couldn't I do that? Why couldn't I have slain the biggest dragon in, you know, World of Warcraft, and then auctioned off my sword to raise money for, you know, some research on a disease or whatever, and then the person who has that has a status symbol. That's the actual sword that killed that dragon in that 6 speed run that Gabriel did that one time. That's like legendary. And then how do you prevent these tools from being overpowered in other games, right? So how do you like get that sweet sweet spot? But whenever that gets ironed out, and I'm positive it will, because there's just so much value there. Already we're dealing with these predatory practices that we've mentioned, and these are all Web 2 problems. So Web 3, the trade-offs, it's not, you know, it's not a panacea. It doesn't cure everything, but the trade-offs from being able to have this in-game ownership and being able to take your assets and trade them on decentralized exchanges, I believe that it outweighs the downside so drastically that it's only a matter of time before people are sort of wake up to the benefits of this.
There's also no requirement that NFTs are associated with microtransactions or anything like that. For example, Wildlife Studios, free to play, they give out NFTs. If you don't want to put any extra money into the game, like, you don't have to. I mean, I think like a lot of the concern is that your Horizon Zero Dawns, your Last of Us's of the world, your prestige games are just going to turn into these NFT. You know, every time I do something, I have to pay and get an NFT or whatever, which I really don't think is going to be the case. I think that it's much more likely that you acquire NFTs throughout your playthrough. 99% of them you don't care about, but there's 1% of them that are really cool, or like trophies, like kind of like trophies in games. You know, if you don't play, you know, if you don't really pay attention to trophies, you don't have to. It's not a big deal. But if you're like a completionist, if you really love a game, you can make sure to like do all the things, you get all the achievements, and then if you really 100% a game, you get the platinum. And then there's some games where that's really easy to do, some games that's really hard to do. Some games only have like 0.1% of people, or like 0.05% of people will get the platinum, and those are really hard, really difficult. But for those 0.05%, it's probably really meaningful. And I think it'll be kind of a similar thing. But yeah, maybe it also allows you to, you know, if you want to kind of jump the line a little bit, you can get some of these more rare collectibles without putting in 100 hours. But just because you just really love this game so much, but maybe you have a kid and you can't spend, you know, 20-30 hours a week putting in a grind.
Can't grind. Yeah, you can't put the grind in.
You know, it's just not an attainable thing for you, but it still matters enough to you that you'd like to kind of have all the cool stuff. Like, I think that's a trade-off a lot of people are willing to make.
The weird thing is that I looked into Roblox, and I sent Gabriel the video of this, but more recently, I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch that one as well.
Yeah, I haven't yet, no.
Yeah, we'll add it to the show notes. But Roblox is an incredibly popular game, like almost as popular as Minecraft, and it's incredibly popular with very young kids. However, it has an in-game currency called Robux, and you can buy Robux. And you use Robux for buying in-game experiences, which are custom player-generated levels or custom levels developed by teams of developers, because this is a $60 to $80 billion company right now, right? And if you look at the actual store, they're NFTs, and that's a cryptocurrency. There's even black market plugins that connect directly to the back end, and you can pay for in-game in-game items for a game for 13-year-olds with Bitcoin, right? So it's happening already. And because of the success of that game, it's going to drive everyone to do the same. Even though like a game like Minecraft says, we say no to cryptocurrency. Well, they have an in-game store. They have purchasable in-game assets. It's fundamentally the same. But as kids will soon learn, just like with Robux, you don't actually have the ability to cash it out legally. So you have to use dark websites, which is sketchy, and we're literally sending kids there intentionally. Or you use a heavily discounted official developer portal to do it, right? Like the incentives are literally sending them to black market sites. And it's not even on the dark web. You can still search and find the sites. It took me about 2 minutes. The very weird thing is that like people want these kinds of in-game economies, and the kids growing up are actually already accustomed to it. So the only difference is that you don't push the process of cashing out underground. You admit that Robux is actually a cryptocurrency because you can trade it player to player. And I'm not talking about account swaps. I'm talking about actually like trading it in for cash. And it's part of the game design, and it has to be, because so much of it depends on user-generated content. But the worst part that really bothers me about Roblox specifically, the game engine is closed source, right? The currency is non-transparent and closed. You can get your accounts banned at any time. So it's basically like the worst of traditional software, and like it's going to be the ecosystem and the playground that kids are most used to. Like I want Roblox built with Unity. It's open source. So if someone learns how to develop it, they're a game developer. That's transferable skills, and they can do anything else, right? Then I want the actual token to be independently verifiable, non-custodial, and transparent, like a cryptocurrency. And it's really like there's a reason why adults are using all of these fancy tools, and it'll become incredibly obvious once like Avalanche subnets are in production and people literally see that scaling is already here. We don't have to wait for it anymore. And then we're just going to be able to say, hey, remember how it's like that? Well, what if it didn't suck? Right? What if you weren't locked in? And as an engineer, like I couldn't imagine working on closed source technology. I couldn't imagine spending a 20-year career working on something in which I can't fundamentally tinker with it. But that's kind of where the gaming industry is now, and it's slowly gonna follow like the rest of the gaming industry. And like also game developers are gonna finally have a slightly better like quality of life than like normal software engineers, right? And it's slowly going to change, but it's going to be a process, and it's going to be exciting to watch for sure.
And that's another paradigm that's sort of changing, right? Because right now, if you create a PlayStation game or an Xbox game, I don't know the exact I don't know the exact workflow, but you know, presumably you have to have the hardware. So you're getting like next generation hardware or virtualized or something. I'm totally speculating here, but I presume this is what it's like, right? So there's a new Xbox coming out. They virtualize it. They have some type of SDK that you must be licensed, NDA'd like crazy to get access to this kind of stuff. Then, you know, the developer tooling and the languages that you have to know are probably hyper specific to this one particular platform. And I suspect there's not a ton of open source overlap. And like you said, doing closed source stuff, it just seems like we're right on the brink of kind of like a huge paradigm shift across the entire board.
Yeah, and I think the hardest thing is that it's been hard making quality games as an independent. So there's been like consolidation, conglomeration, that has favored large pocketbooks and large distributors. I think mobile has been relatively exempt because it's a lower barrier to entry overall. But I mean, I'm not going to start naming game studios.
Well, I
but
mean, it's
there's
just the
been a
thing.
lot of
Games are so expensive. Games are so hard to make. I mean, it takes, I mean, like for like a AAA game, it takes them like 4 to 7 years to make.
Yep.
So like, if you're going to sink and like hundreds of people.
Yeah.
7 years. Like,
it seems to me like we could use the same model as ILOs to do games, couldn't we? Because we're tokenizing these litigation offerings, and it's kind of like raising money. It seems like the same paradigm is going to happen for video games and music and movies. This whole creative.
Yeah, we actually had an announcement this week about a company who's doing that for movies.
Epic.
Yeah. It's called I Am Not Satoshi, I think, the documentary. I was just bummed because I couldn't find a trailer.
Well, that's
like
why
you make the announcement
they're getting the funding to make the movie, right? How can you have a trailer if you haven't made the movie yet?
Well, I mean, lots of people
along. I don't know.
For video games, it's the standard. They like spend all their budget on a high quality trailer, and it's like coming in 5 years.
Yeah, Cyberpunk. Yeah.
But there are some like big AAA blockchain games like Shrapnel. I'm super excited by that game. It's like a proper AAA rated game. They were able to access financing. They seem actually like they're actually independent of a larger conglomerate. Having looked at like kind of the team, the ownership structure, and NFTs are definitely playing a huge part because it's definitely funding development of it. But on the flip side, there's this really cool aspect where this is my favorite part of what they're innovating on in kind of the marketplace. You can sell user-generated content in marketplaces, and it appears in game. And it's also, you essentially get it to, it plays as part of the game, and you can get it from other players through gameplay.
Give us an example of that.
So it's what's it called? Like, it's an extraction shooter. So you go into like an unsafe zone and you try to scavenge some loot, and then you're risking your in-game items. And then when you get out, you get to keep the loot or you don't because you got killed. But if someone else kills you, they can actually take your custom, unique like items, and now they have like a trophy from you. It's going to be really cool.
But what about you mentioned you can sell, you mentioned you can sell user generated, how did you say it? Okay. Yeah, we can gloss over it. I was trying to
picture. You can sell user generated content. And so it's like a 3D file that you put on the marketplace. People equip it. They're called vanities in their game. And they're kind of like skins or stickers or.
Do they have an SDK? Yeah. How do you actually create the stuff? Do they have a GUI?
They're in the process of building it out now, so soon.
Got it. Yeah, massive respect to Shrapnel. Those guys are going to be huge. Okay.
Cool. So there's one last thing, because I know we're about to wrap up. Something that I definitely want to talk about, and this is the company that I started right before I joined Ava Labs with several of my coworkers. Remember how I mentioned that like me and a coworker like built a crazy prototype in blockchain like 5 or 6 years ago when I first got started in crypto? Well, he's one of my co-founders, Aki, and I also joined with Johnny as well, and he came from Status, and he was their former chief marketing officer, and we launched at first it was an NFT marketplace for music. And then we're like, okay, subnets are happening. Like, this is crazy. Like, how are we going to go with this? What's the future? Like, if we could build anything, what would it be? And this is where like a lot of the discussions about the gaming industry really inspired me. And I'm thinking like, we can program incentives. We have like this competitive advantage with the cost per transaction. Like, we're in the music industry, and we produced and hosted artists. We basically threw like a rap concert in Brooklyn, like an underground rap concert. We like produced it, filmed it, recorded it, and live streamed it. And we sold NFTs for like the tickets for the entrance.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome.
And for live streams. So like we had producers that were like formerly in the boiler room, like producing these high quality live streams, and the NFTs were basically access to the gated live stream concert as well. And we were basically like putting on these entire shows. And we're like, the actual act of promoting the event is so much work, and so much of that money goes to like Facebook, Instagram, and like paid advertising. Yet when we actually like through the event, it was personal recommendations that actually filled the room, right? And we were sitting there and we were brainstorming. We're like, okay, cool. Like, what do we do next? Like, how do we build something on the subnet? How do we like really blow this up? And what we did was essentially a peer-to-peer marketing network that's going to rival traditional advertising networks. So if you bring friends and they follow, they buy a ticket to a concert through an NFT that you share, then essentially you will get compensated for your friends showing up to the show. You did the promotional activities. So we're essentially creating a social token using using Avalanche. And we're going to do it so that we try to undercut the traditional big tech advertising by doing it directly peer to peer. And yeah, we built it out. We did a launch at NFT NYC, and now we're like working in the next iteration and preparing for a subnet launch as well.
Wow, that's pretty epic. What's it called?
It's called Coral. The domain name is coral.fan.
We'll put what's the subdomain? I'm sorry, what's the TLD?
FAN. Fan. And it's coral as in coral reef. So coral.fan. And there's a bunch of innovation that I really wanted to kind of like push the boundaries of how people can actually onboard into crypto. I believe that we're in the mass adoption phase, and gaming is definitely going to demonstrate it when we onboard 1.4 million users from Castle Crush as soon as they trigger the NFT game. Like, people will be using blockchain, they won't even know it. It'll just be the plumbing, like actually solving people's real world problems. And in Coral, we essentially combined fiat and crypto payment rails into NFTs. And we think that NFTs are essentially going to be a type of social currency that say, hey, look, I was an early supporter of this musician, then it would essentially set you up to be able to share. And yep, that's it. Yeah.
This is rad, man.
Thanks. Yeah, we're really pushing like how to get mass adoption. And we made it so that you have both social login and MetaMask and soon Core login, but it's all non-custodial. So we use something called Web3 auth in the background. And yeah, I'm a strong believer in the type of technology that we build. And there's like no way that I would sit on the sidelines and not be building something myself. It's too exciting. It's too monumental to not kind of like put your stamp on something to be like, yes, I made this.
That's inspiring. That's a nice little bit of wisdom there. Everybody take that and let that resonate. It's too exciting to sit on the sidelines right now. There's never been a greater time in all of human history to have a great idea, raise capital, find like-minded people, and then just change the world. You can take a good idea, can spread around the world, and just, you know, one single retweet from the right person. And so, yeah, just even seeing this inspires me a lot. Nice job, Lucian. This is rad.
It's crazy. I love there's been some articles I've read over the years that talk about what do like the highest agency people in the world do. And like, you know, 1,000 years ago, the most talented people became like generals. You go off to like fight in the war, or like try to go conquer foreign lands. But now we've evolved, so now it like, you know, the most creative people and the most high achieving people, they can just sit on their laptops and code and make companies and launch products, and we've come a long way as a race.
Oh yeah.
The story of the singularity is really the story of the individual becoming asymmetrically empowered. Because if you sort of look at the arc of human history, you know, we used to be very tribal, and then it just seems like every time technology becomes more powerful, the individual becomes more asymmetrically empowered. And then you see examples of, you know, somebody like Satoshi. Let's just presume for a second that was in fact one, you know, a single person, a gentleman. You know, think about the impact that one person had, because they were so competent across the field in all of these different disciplines, and they were able to bring it all together and create this thing which literally changed money, you know, like one of the most critical abstractions in all of humanity. This idea of wealth and finance and money completely flipped on its head by one single person because they were asymmetrically empowered. And so that kind of just speaks to what you're saying, Connor, like as technology increases, now it's all about being a creative. If you are a creative and you can take your ideas and put them together, and it speaks to what Lucian said earlier about like once you get your fundamentals down and it becomes muscle memory, then you can be creative. So when I went to college, I studied classical music, and you know, classical music can seem real dry if you're simply looking at the notes on a page. But as soon as you leave the notes on a page and you go to your instrument and start freestyling, then all of a sudden you're creating this transformative music which changes people's lives. And it's like that for me with software now. Software can seem incredibly dry if you don't know anything about it. You just see somebody at a terminal and you're like, wow, that looks boring, until you realize this person is like an artist and they broke beyond the formalisms and now they're freestyling. And it's just incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and that's how I feel like we are right now with incentive design. So we can literally code the way that people interact, essentially. And the biggest challenge that I think that we have to face is outcompeting big tech, especially in the advertising and the social media space. And I don't think of it as an abstract challenge. I think of it as a necessity for human progress. Because I don't actually think, and I'm not waiting for them to be regulated out of existence. I don't think that's how it's going to happen. I think that there's going to be someone that creates a niche and they're going to create a self-sustaining business, and that business is going to snowball. And then all of a sudden they're going to outcompete them. And they have to outcompete them in the marketplace for attention and ideas. So when I was thinking like, what kind of incentives do I want to program? And I'm like, I want to free musicians, because I met a lot of really good friends, some of my closest in the music scene. And I hope that the next generation can do the same as well. And it's becoming harder and harder because I'm watching new artists spending $800 to $2 million to break new artists in social media ads. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's more than the artist got paid for his own music, right? So we have these like massive gatekeepers essentially dividing attention. And I tried kind of like stepping away and being like a monk in a cave and not using social media. And it got worse, right? So now I definitely think that it's kind of our responsibility in the things that we design to outcompete the inferior alternatives. And yeah, doing that with incredible software, doing that with like the right software, and being able to be in the position in which you have the power to make the right decisions on how these things work is kind of the only thing that can make the difference. And it's ironic that I had to work in philanthropy to realize that, right? You have to be effective in your altruism, right? It's not enough to like want something good to happen. It's like, is it the right impact after it has been delivered? So that's how I kind of see this as well. It's kind of like my dream to make that one little part of society a bit better.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think that's probably as good a note as any to end on.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Lucian. You absolutely rule, dude. Congratulations on your life. I know you got a lot of good, big things happening. Congratulations. Do you want to let people know how they can find you online?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. My handle is Societal Ruin. And you can
spell it real quick.
Societal. I actually don't know how to spell it. It's spelled correctly though.
Yeah, I think it's SOCIETALRUIN. Societal Ruin, I believe is correct. But yeah,
yeah. Thank you. I always mess it up when I have to say it properly. It's like yeah. It's an anagram of my name, so I have to live up to it. Tear down the old to build something new.
Very exciting. All right. Yeah, you're welcome back anytime, dude. Anytime you want to just hang out. I see you dusted off your mic, so I have a feeling Lucian's back in the podcast game, folks.
Oh,
So
yeah.
anytime you want to kick it, let us know. You have an open invitation anytime. Connor, thoughts?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at DOS_Connor. I was doing a lot of tweeting before I went to Korea, but now got knocked off my game, a little out of my rhythm. So I'll probably be resuming pretty soon. Yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, my name is Gabriel. If you made it this far, you're an absolute champion. Thank you so much. You can find me on Twitter, CG Cardona, CGCARDONA. And we'll be back next week. A special guest we've tried several times. It keeps bumping. Eventually he is going to be here, and I suspect it's next week. So make sure you tune in this next week, and we will be back. And we're going to go ahead and close out like we always do, from Snowflake to Avalanche and through consensus to the stars. Thank you so much, everybody. Cheers.